Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to have you in my home with me and have Ami here with me. And for those of you who are local, feel free to come on the first and third Saturdays to my house. You just have to register online to get the address. But that'll be sent out all those weeks. So thank you for being here. So this week we're studying Achrei Mot, after the death. This is the parsha after the death of Aaron's sons because they lit a strange fire. You may remember that from a couple weeks ago. And in this week's parsha, the Torah is concerned about the impurity of the Mishkan, the sanctuary itself. And it's concerned about it because the teachings are that a defiled sanctuary leads the divine to withdraw the divine self from the community. So I'm thinking about the divine sanctuary not as an actual temple, right, but as the planet itself. Right? We live in a divine sanctuary, and we are defiling it in so many ways. We're defiling it by defiling its people. We're defiling it by defiling its animals. We're defiling it by defiling the land itself. And this parsha makes me wonder if the divine is withdrawing the divine self because of our actions. And this parsha helps us explore what is needed for us to do in order to call forth or bring forth the divine, to be worthy of divine re-entering this holy sanctuary. Because without divine presence, we're taught that we partner with the divine. So if the divine presence is absent, who do we partner with to transform the world? Is the divine not present with us to partner with us? And don't we need some divine source, some cosmic consciousness, something beyond our individual selves in order to transform our world? Clearly we need all of us. And also I think we also need energies and resources beyond us. Now, I'm saying that while also acknowledging at the same time that there's a lot of amazing actions happening, beauty happening in this world that is in fact calling forth the divine source. So it's this tension, right? But I want to explore that tension and explore in this parsha what it is that the Torah might be helping us to grapple with and understand, to help us bring forth divine energy to partner with us in transforming our world. So we'll turn to the parsha, and as we do, I'll jump in, give some thoughts and reflections, and open up for some questions, and then we'll do some breakout as well. Thank you. So if somebody, no, you're good. If somebody wants to unmute and read the English, that would be wonderful. You can grab it if you want. You like to look at it, I know. Somebody want to unmute themselves and just read the English?
Yahweh spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they drew too close to the presence of Yahweh. Yahweh said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come at will into the shrine behind the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, lest he die. For I appear in the cloud over the cover. Thus only shall Aaron enter the shrine, with a bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall be dressed in a sacral linen tunic, with linen breeches next to his flesh, and be girt with a linen sash, and he shall wear a linen turban. They are sacral vestments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. And from the Israelite community, he shall take 2 he-goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Aaron is to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. Aaron shall take the 2 he-goats and let them stand before Yahweh at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he shall place lots upon the 2 goats, one marked for Yahweh and the other marked for Azazel. Aaron shall bring forward the goat designated by the lot for Yahweh, for he is to offering as a sin offering, while the goat designated by lot for Azazel shall be left standing alive before Yahweh to make expiation with it, and to send it off to the wilderness for Azazel. Aaron shall then offer his bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and his household. He shall slaughter his bull of sin offering, and he shall take a panful of glowing coals, scooped from the altar before Yahweh, and 2 handfuls of finely ground aromatic incense, and bring this behind the curtain. He shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, so that the cloud from the incense screens the cover that is over the ark of the pact, lest he die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger over the cover on the east side. And in front of the cover, he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. He shall then slaughter the people's goat with sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain, and do with its blood as he has done with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it over the cover and in front of the cover. Thus he shall purge the shrine of the impurity and transgression of the Israelites, whatever their sins. And he shall do the same for the tent of meeting, which abides with them in the midst of their impurity. When he goeth in to make expiation in the shrine, nobody else shall be in the tent of meeting until he comes out. When he has made expiation for himself and his household, and for the whole congregation of Israel, he shall go to the altar that is before Yahweh and purge it. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and of the goat, and apply it to each of the horns of the altar. And the rest of the blood he shall sprinkle on it with his finger 7 times. Thus he shall purify it of the defilement of the Israelites and consecrate it. When he has finished purging the shrine, the tent of meeting, and the altar, the live goat shall be brought forward. Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities and transgressions of the Israelites, whatever their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and it shall be sent off through the wilderness to a designated agent. Thus the goat shall carry on it all their iniquities to an inaccessible region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. And Aaron shall go into the tent of meeting, take off the linen vestments that he put on when he entered the shrine, and leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in the holy precinct, and put on his vestments. Then he shall come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, making expiation for himself and for the people. The fat of the sin offering he shall turn into smoke on the altar. The one who sets his Azazel goat free shall wash those clothes and bathe the body in water, and after that may re-enter the camp. The bull of sin offering and the goat of sin offering, whose blood has brought into purge the shrine, shall be taken outside the camp, and their hides, flesh, and dung shall be consumed in fire. The one who burned them shall wash those clothes and bathe the body in water, and after that may re-enter the camp. And this shall be to you a law for all time. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall practice self-denial, and you shall do no manner of work, neither the citizen nor the alien who resides among you. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify you of all your sins. You shall be pure before Yahweh. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. It is a law for all time. The priest who has been anointed and ordained to serve as priest in place of his father shall make expiation. He shall put on the linen vestments and sacral vestments. He shall purge the innermost shrine. He shall purge the tent of meeting and the altar. And he shall make expiation for the priests and for all the people of the congregation. This shall be to you a law for all time, to make atonement for the Israelites for all their sins once a year. And Moses did as Yahweh commanded him.
I'm going to jump in here for a moment just to go through what we've just read a little bit and open it up for some questions and reflections. So what's being set forth in this chapter here, chapter 16, which of course the Torah doesn't have chapters, right? But the actual Torah itself doesn't have any breaks, is actually the purification process used on Yom Kippur by the holy priest, by the high priest. And it's a process to purify the sanctuary. And what this is teaching us is that, sorry, I just want to click something that's popping up on my screen. There we go. Is that before we can engage, so on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, we engage in personal teshuvah, right? We try to essentially purify ourselves. And what this parsha is teaching us is that before we can purify ourselves, we need to purify the sanctuary, because the sanctuary has become impure by our transgressions. And before God can forgive us for our transgressions, the holy space needs to be purified so the divine is actually present with us. And I find this really interesting because it's drawing a connection then between our personal transgressions and our collective transgressions, and that neither can be effectuated. You can't effectuate transformation and healing from the personal transgressions if you don't do it for the collective, and you can't do it for the collective if you don't do it for the personal. And Abraham Joshua Heschel has a beautiful way of saying this, which is, some are guilty and all are responsible. So even though we may not have participated in the collective transgressions, we all have responsibility to purify the collective so that we can engage in our personal purification. And the prophetic texts, I was looking at a paper I wrote, a final paper I wrote for my rabbinic smicha about the prophetic voice and prophetic empathy. And I was reminded of these prophetic texts that tell us very, very clearly that there is this connection between what happens in an oppressive society and what happens to individuals within that society. And even if we're not participating in the oppressive actions of our society, we're still going to experience the effects of the divine judgment, if you will, the divine response in response to our collective transgression. So I'm just going to read a little bit from some of these prophetic texts because they're really quite powerful. And if you think about the Torah itself, right, the poison and toxicity ends up devouring the entire society and all within it. And if you think of the story of Noah or Sodom and Gomorrah, that becomes very clear. But here's an example from Isaiah. In this example, Isaiah is basically saying that even the wealthiest in society are not going to be protected. The society will collapse on them as well, burning up even the most financially protected. And he says in 131, stored wealth should become as tow, and he who amassed it a spark, and the two shall burn together with none to quench. And Jeremiah helps us understand that if you collude with power, you're not safe. So even if you think you're sitting in the seats of holy power or unholy power, let's say, still you're not safe. He writes, they have become, and he's speaking here about the priests, and he's criticizing the priests for colluding with power, and warns that the deity, the divine, is going to punish the nation for this collusion. They have become fat and sleek. They pass over the acts of the evil. They do not judge the cause of the orphans, and they prosper, and they do not judge the right of the needy. Shall I not punish such deeds, says Yud-Heh-Vaveh? Shall my soul not be avenged on a nation such as this? An appalling and horrible thing has occurred in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests dominate by their strength. From the most insignificant to the greatest, all of them are greedy for gain, and from the prophet to the priest, they all deal falsely. And Jeremiah also teaches us that the wise and comfortable are not safe. So even if you think you're just leading a comfortable life, it's still not good enough. The wise men will be put to shame. They shall be dismayed and captured. Behold, the word of Yud-Heh-Vaveh, they rejected. What wisdom is in them? And this is Isaiah. Tremble, you who are at ease. Shudder, you complacent ones. Strip and make yourselves bare. Gird sackcloth upon your loins. And this one is particularly, to me, this is from Habakkuk. It's not a prophet we normally hear from too much. And in this quote, we're learning that even artists, even those who create beauty in our world, are not necessarily safe. Woe to him who heaps what is not his own. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, who has destroyed many peoples to set your nest on high, to escape danger. For stones cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork responds. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. There's a teaching in the Talmud that if one person, if you see the transgressions of your family and you don't speak out in opposition to it, you are responsible. But it doesn't stop there. If you see the transgressions of your community and don't speak out, you will be held responsible. And it doesn't stop there. If you see the transgressions of the world and don't speak out, you will be held responsible. And I think that these teachings are I was reading this today and I thought, wow, these are rather relevant for this historical moment in which we live, when we see the incredible sins that are being enacted in the name of Judaism, in the name of the nation state of Israel, upon others, and also in our nation, with our money and our dollars and our war machinery, and many other nations around the world. And these teachings in this parsha is really clear that we have to engage in some type of cleansing, not of ourselves only, but first the cleansing of the sanctuary, so that we're worthy of even turning to God and asking for forgiveness for our individual transgressions, and so we can turn to others and ask for their forgiveness. We need divine presence for that to happen. And so I think what we're gonna do now is Austin, are you taking a break? As if you are, I'm gonna keep. Okay, cool. You just turned off your screen. Thanks. We'll go into breakout rooms, and I'll say what I'm going to ask slowly so Austin can capture it, because I was neglectful and didn't put it in first. And so the questions I want us to explore in the breakout groups, and then we'll come back and have more discussion, and we'll also talk about the whole scapegoating, right? That was the word scapegoating came from this parsha, right? They put the goat out for the community's sins. So scapegoating a goat, or in this case, right, or sometimes a person or a community for the sins of others. So in times like these, when we're witnessing untold collective sins in the name of the state of Israel, in the name of Judaism, and even in the name of the United States and other countries around the world, what is the kind of purification that we might need to engage in as a community? Like, how do we purify the sanctity of the planet, the sanctity of the world, in order that we can be worthy of engaging in individual purification? So how do you, when you read this, what kind of ideas, when you read about we're not going to slaughter animals, we're not going to scapegoat anyone or any animal, hopefully, but what could we do? What is something that you think we could do in our historical moment that we're living in to help purify the planet and ourselves so that we can move forward? Because I think this teaching is telling us that there actually has to be some action that we take to purify, to be worthy of returning to holiness. Is that clear for folks? Can I get a thumbs up from someone if that's clear? Okay, I'm seeing head shake. Okay, great. So you'll have about 10 to 12 minutes in your breakout room, and then we'll return back. There's Bob in his studio. Looks like everyone's back. Okay. So that Ami and I were saying that wasn't an easy question. It's hard to think about. But I'd love to hear if folks had some ideas. We had some here that we'll share too. About what type of rituals or actions or things that we can engage in to help purify the sanctuary, right? The community as a whole, the world as a whole, and then ourselves. want to share what you talked about? Cecilia, lovely to see you. Please unmute so we can hear you. You're still there. You go.
I was with two great people. It was wonderful conversation. And I will just end. I ended with a thought that that I would like to share, and it doesn't help further us along, but this time around, I mean, I'm ancient, so I've been, in all of, as many of you are, in many protests and demonstrations and trying to change the world my whole life. And so this time around, I feel very powerless, and I feel like the best I can do is engage in conversations honestly. So I would just like to share that. And we had some very good sharings. I'll let the people speak for themselves, the two men that were in my group.
Thank you, Cecilia.
May I ask a question on that, Cecilia?
Sure.
You said you feel powerless. How is it different before? I was like 10 when the last, the Vietnam stuff was going on, so I didn't really get it. Plus, my parents were rah Nixon and so forth. So, how is it different then compared to now? If it was, because I feel powerless too. I'm gonna head out to the UC.
Yeah, then I was so completely sure of what could happen to change things. And I mean, we changed. I feel like we stopped the war, but I was actively involved. And this time around, a lot of things are confusing. Like one person in my group said, I'm for the people. I'm for the people on both sides. And so there are these sides, and like I keep jumping from one to the next. I have cousins in Israel who are totally scared. And, and so although I'm a member of Voices for Peace in Palestine, I also have a definite heart for the people of Israel who don't want this to be happening, and who are scared. And so it's complex. It's much more complex. And so anyway, I know we don't want to hang on to this. We want to go on to what are we doing? So what I'm doing is having honest conversations.
Beautiful.
I'm just wondering if the politicians, you felt like they were listening to you in Vietnam, and I'll stop.
Yeah, I can say, having experienced that time in college, right out and high school and going into college, that
Todd, you're muted.
I'm talking. That's Ami.
Ami's talking.
One reason is we were, every one of us, scared out of our gourds that we might die, that we might actually be sent to Vietnam. So we had our lives on the line. Even if we felt safe in school, my deferment lapsed, and I was called, but I finagled out of it. We were all scared. There was a fear. There was not only, well, that was overriding. And today, it's as Cecilia said, it seems complicated, and there's personal conflicts about what's going on there. I mean, it seems very clear that what our voice needs to be raised, and I think the student struggle has empowered me and all of us to do that. But back then, it was a different story. It wasn't whether you were Jewish or not Jewish. No, there were no two groups fighting each other on campus. There was one group fighting the government, and it was a whole different dynamic. Todd, you didn't experience that? How old are you?
Does someone?
Anyway.
No, I'm 66.
You're a puppy. You're a puppy. Okay, we'll continue the conversation.
I wish
Thank you.
I wish I had. I didn't I was told by my parents and stuff, like I said, rah Nixon, San Diego area. And it's looking back, it was horrible. But what's incredible is we're still here, and now that the climate. I mean, I was writing papers about the climate back then. About energy use was a thing. Conserve energy. You're going to run out of energy. Well, now it's and pollution. But now it's like for real. In my kid's lifetime could be. So I mean, we're still here. So I'm going to do what I can. I'm with what the time I have left, I'm going to head out to University of California. I think just hang around. Tell those.
So I was gonna, yeah, I was gonna say that the student movements that are happening are quite inspiring, right? Like they are taking a stand and speaking. And I was just reading an article this morning that while it looks like these movements were sparked spontaneously, kind of like we thought, some of us maybe thought or read or were told that the Rosa Parks was just like this old woman who just got tired. And no, the student movements were actually movements that had been built. They were building and practicing. They were speaking to Black Panthers. They were speaking to elders. They actually planned this. It was very thought out. So there's been stuff posted about why are all the tents the same? Clearly they're being funded by whomever. It's like, because they've been planning this for a while. They ordered tents. They probably went on the same website and got the tents. So to me, that was very inspiring that the students have been thinking about the actions that they're going to take and how they're going to be effective. And I think it was Sam. Yeah, it was Sam, Austin's partner, who said, they learned how to barricade themselves in buildings by barricading themselves in schools from active shooter drills. And they used those very skills that they had to learn in a really tragic situation to be able to occupy buildings. And it took police a long time to get in because they knew how to barricade themselves in, horrifyingly so. So that gives me hope. And I do want to return to the question I asked, right? Which is, so what are some, like maybe the student actions are part of some of the actions and things we can do to cleanse and clear holy space. But what else did people think of? And I see a hand up and I can't, Kamal and then Jacqueline. First Kamal, he had his hand up, and then Jacqueline.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rabbi Kat, and thanks for other Rabbi. I don't know your name yet, but I'm so happy with the students. There is a difference between Vietnam and here, that the draft was going on. I know I worked for Swords to Plowshares. We still had problems with the poor vets who got recruited, who were forced to serve 30, 40 years later. I mean, getting them housing and being homeless and just being destroyed after war. Today is quite unique, in my opinion, is that we are learning that there are technologies being used in Palestine that are not only targeting people that they want to intend to go after, but they have allowed to program an allowable death list around that individual through AI. So I think we're seeing a reaction where people begin to recognize that what's happening in this area could very well happen to us. And that's part of our sermon we just talked about. It's that we're all interconnected, that no one's absolved. The person that creates the art could be just as much a victim to this outside influence through logic and through the tools that we've created. And so the cleansing, first and foremost, we all have to recognize what sin is and that everyone's responsible. I don't care what side you're in. You could be committing murder. It's a sin. Okay. Then once everyone recognizes that, yes, it's a sin, then in my opinion, the cleansing can begin. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go across the screen like I'm seeing. So Jacqueline Thalberg, if I may be not, and then Jacqueline Schwartz. There's two Jacquelines, so I have to say your last names.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I have to say, and I did say that in the group, I'm noticing a marked difference in the way I see what is going on from when I was in America to when I am here now in Austria.
Yeah.
And to me, what that says is I'm noticing that in America, you're really far removed from the whole thing. I'm saying when I say you, I mean, I was too. That's how I felt. As I'm sitting here in the country where things happened that created the thought of Israel, yeah, it was here that Theodor Herzl wrote about Zionism. It was here that, you know, the Holocaust was experienced the way it was, and it is here that we as Jews are still in the same situation we were then. And so what it led me to is that I understand the emotional things that are going on in this war on a totally different, on a personal level. And so I am realizing that the wrong thing to do is to judge them, to judge Palestinians, to judge Jews, to judge Zionists, to judge. Because I am experiencing that all this is coming out of tremendous fear and anger of each individual involved and not involved. And when I hear you know, sides being taken, it doesn't matter which side, really. It always seems to me to evade the central theme, which was also in the Parsha, which is, how am I responsible? What makes me responsible? How does that feel? And what can I do in order to step up to this responsibility? Not telling other people what to do, not even necessarily joining a movement, but the sort of almost the type of introspection that we do around Yom Kippur.
Thank you. I was going to say that one of the things that we're taught, of course, on Yom Kippur and in Judaism as a whole is to clean our own house, let's say, individually and community as a whole, right? And because we're part of community. So really in Judaism, there's strong teachings to not judge and criticize others, unless it's in your community, right? But to actually challenge yourself and your community to be more holy. And so I think that's what you're speaking to, is we have to look inside, and there still is this call to hold our community accountable, hold ourselves and our community accountable. And so that's what we're exploring. So Jacqueline Schwartz now. Thank you, Jacqueline. Joyce, I see your hand. There's two people before you. Then I'll call on you so you can put your hand down. You don't have to keep holding it up. Go ahead, Jacqueline. Thanks.
Yeah, I think just to follow on what you said, I'm feeling somewhat uncomfortable with this group at the moment, because I feel that there is a lack of introspection. I do not believe that all the student protests are pure, that they should all be applauded, that they will all lead to the end of this conflict, that from what I've read, that divestment is going to help students. It'll probably raise their tuition if it happens, that it's going to end the occupation. I do not believe that. And also, having been on the front steps of Sproul Hall at Berkeley for the anti-Vietnam War protests, I don't believe they are in any way the same. So I don't even think this is like the protests, the very admirable protests against the prospect of the US invading Iraq. I mean, there were millions on the street then it didn't do any good. So I'm uncomfortable with that, this sort of blanket approval of that. I'm uncomfortable with mentioning Jewish Voices for Peace as if that's the only one. I've been a long-term member of Shalom Achshav, which is the main anti-occupation group in Israel. I'm a member of the Canadian support group for that. So I am feeling a discomfort. The only other thing I can say is that I know people who really wish they could do something besides read Haaretz. And I tell them, join a group, whatever group it is, because I think I think that helps. I think some kind of community helps in this. I don't think it's just a purification of ourselves as individuals. Really, what can we do besides raising our consciousness? And who knows if we're right about that?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your honest truth and discomfort. I think that we welcome here, and we've said this again and again and again, a diversity of groups that people belong in or want to share information about or value and different perspectives. So thank you for sharing yours.
Different from what? I mean, what do you mean various perspectives? Because are you saying that my perspective is very, very different from the rest of this group?
I did not say very different. I said different perspectives. I said just varied perspectives. I did not say very different. That's not what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's very different.
Varied.
I mean, those kids, those students. All right.
Hold on. There's other people.
There's other people speaking.
Okay.
Todd. Thank you. Thank you. So, Zoom user, if you could tell us your name. I don't. You're next speaking with the beautiful pink scarf on. But I don't know your name. So if you could unmute and share your name, because the name on the screen is just Zoom user, and I'm.
This is me?
Name.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name is Minerva. Thank you so much. I love everything that that is happening, and what I believe this has started with the student is a different narrative, and a lot of dialogue that was not being taken, being done. I mean, it's always one voice most of the time. So like in our community, I'm from New York, and for many years, a lot of people, even the people surround us, they never had a chance to hear the other side of of the coin. So for me to be having dialogues, to conversations, that's very important for me. And some people, they just assume that what they've been hearing all the time. Mass media, the people, the privileges that people have to have a voice always. So now a lot of, we sing a lot of different voices. And what we've been called to do is exactly what can we do so we can have at least conversation, even though sometimes the conversation is, discomfort, but we should have it. And how can we also be there for a lot of the students? Because even though the press has created something different, most of the students that I saw and I seen and I've been there were just trying to have a conversation, and they were there denouncing and for peace. Some other groups came and they were very aggressive, because remember, a lot of the other groups, they always been feeling privileged of doing whatever they, is their voice and no one else. So to have this opportunity to have dialogues and to engage and to see both, to hear both sides, to have an open mind. So for me, that's a lot to do. Like we have to talk to our family. I was telling Todd about my church, that the first time, no, because that's God, everything is like, that's the way God's wanted. without really going into deep thinking about the real message that God has for us. How are we representing? Are we trying to, to bring, even though if we don't have the tools, but what are we showing up with? That's
Thank you. Yeah. So there's different perspectives and opinions here, and I'm grateful that we can share those different experiences and perspectives, because we each come to this with different traumas, different experiences, different beliefs, different tendencies and yearnings. I mean, I think we actually all yearn for peace and justice, but just different ways that we engage with what we're witnessing and how we experience it in our somatic bodies as well as in our intellectual beings and in our hearts. And so I just want to invite us for a moment to take a collective deep breath. And Joyce, and then Ari.
Thank you. So I feel like there's a bunch of things I want to say, but the bottom line of well, I really do have to say that I think that the students today are very brave and very gutsy, and all of the opposition that we had during the Vietnam War era is kind of almost nothing compared to what it is today. The corporate media, which I'm sure is connected with the arms industry, is putting out these messages. I never hear anti-genocide. It's always pro-Palestinian. And I think that there could be a difference, but not that it matters, but the message is important to say that these students are anti-genocide. And, there's a lot of arguments from people, oh, this isn't genocide. But when I was told to go to a dictionary and look it up, I did. And I put it online to say this is genocide. That's what the dictionaries, 2 of them said. Anyway, taking action of any kind is better than not doing anything and just feeling helpless and miserable. So even if the action doesn't have the immediate results that we desperately need for the innocents that are being massacred, we can go to wh.gov. That's an action that we can take. wh.gov, G-O-V, is the White House website, and at the top of the page that comes up, it's all about what President Biden is doing, which has maybe nothing to do with what we are talking about. But when we scroll down, there is a contact us form, and it shows that you can either send a text or you can use the form. And if you want to get a response, I would say use the form, even if the response isn't what we want. And we can say,
Joyce, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. Austin put the link in the chat. So we have that information in the chat for folks, because it's going to be easier for folks to just on that. So, yes.
wh.gov and say stop the genocide, hostages home now, and humanitarian aid only. And as the Pirkei Avot says, it is not for us to finish the task, neither may we desist from it. So that's something that we can do, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ari, good morning or afternoon, your time.
Yeah, good morning. So I really appreciate this group. I haven't been here for a while, so I apologize for that. But I really like the fact that I think Celia talked about having conversations and continuing to do that. And I think that's a form of activism. I think it shouldn't be put on some kind of ranking or anything. I think one of the Jacquelines, I'm sorry, I don't think it was Schwartz, it was the Thalberg, I think, talked about the inner spiritual work that some of us feel we have to do. And that is a kind of political action. I believe it impacts the world and changes it for the better. And Jacqueline Schwartz impressed upon me that she sees deeply into how things are different and it's not black and white. And I think we all can agree that in any demonstration, any protest, no matter how planned and organized, will be messy, and people will have different views, and that's the nature usually of big tent kind of work. And I think that the idea that we work through the internet is a very positive idea too. I'm hard put to contribute much else. Obviously, there are options for people who have sources of income that provide these options to possibly go to Israel and do work there in different peace organizations that are still working on the West Bank. So my close soul friend is Arik Asherman, and he's still going to the West Bank and doing the heavy lifting pretty often. And that's important too, because he documents that. And there are now, growing numbers of demonstrations in Israel, Palestine too. So there are many options. I think everyone's working at where they have to be. I really believe that. And if you haven't figured that out, then you will, because, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Ari. Achrei, please.
The word judgment has come up in various ways today. And I'm just wondering, Rabbi Kat, if you have any reflections on the question. Perhaps the word itself is very fraught, and there are other words or ideas around what that may mean. But for me, I did judge that what Hamas did was barbaric. I do judge that what's happening in Gaza is barbaric. And I am making those judgments. And I'm certainly open, especially with this group, in discussing the complexity, black and white. That was one term that was used, blah, blah, blah. But to me, it has come down to there is a right and wrong. And I admit I can be wrong, and I have been in the past on very serious things, both in the society and in my own life. But Rabbi Kat, do you have any idea or ideas about thinking about judgment in a way that may accommodate some of the observations that have been made here, including my own?
Yeah, thank you, Achrei, for that question. So when I hear that, what I'm thinking about is there's a discernment process, and then there's a judgment. So a discernment process helps us look at facts on the ground, let's say, and we can discern from our own moral compass, or potentially from international laws, or how else we've discerned other actions or other things that have happened in history, and discern and say, this looks like, or we're going to call this a genocide, or we're going to call this violations of international human rights laws, or right. I think the term judgment was being used more about judging each other as personal people. Like, I'm going to judge you as bad or wrong because you see it this way, or you don't see it this way. And I think that becomes, all of us engage in judgment and discernment, right? We judge and discern who's going to be in our community, who's going to be our friends, who we want to tell secrets to, who we trust and who we don't trust. That's a normal part of humanity, of being a human being. I watch my dog judge and discern. I'm not going to go over to this dog because that dog is going to attack me. Turns out he's usually right about that. So that's something we innately do. I think the term, often when we're talking about judgment, we're experiencing someone seeing us as bad or wrong. Us as individuals, I'm talking about. Or maybe us as a people, right? And that's, I think, where it's important to be mindful and cautious. Because I could talk about what somebody does in a way that is more about my personal experience of it and my feelings about it, and then what's not working for me in that. So I might say, someone did something wrong to me. I might say that I feel hurt by that, or I feel surprised and shocked, and it didn't align with my needs for respect. It wasn't respectful or kind or considerate. And those are values that are really important to me. And if it's articulated in that way, the person may experience it as judgment, right? It still may land as judgment, but it's being articulated as my own personal experience. And I can do that about what's happening in Gaza. I could say what I'm watching unfold in Gaza with close to 35,000 people being killed, the majority of them women and children. I feel horrified, dismayed, shocked, disgusted. And I really want to live in a world where we uplift people's humanity, where we care for each other, where we build safe communities, and where we respond to violence with more consciousness and caution and care. Okay. So that's a different way of framing it, right? But I think that when we feel judged personally, or even as a community of Jews, let's say, the response that we usually go to is shame first. And we so don't want to live in shame that we then quickly go into attack and blame and projection. And I think that's where judgment can be really problematic, because it doesn't end up getting us where we want to get to. It often doesn't get us heard. It doesn't get us solutions. It doesn't get transformation. It doesn't uplift holiness. So I don't know if that addressed kind of what you were raising there, Andre, but that's my reflections. Okay.
Very good.
So I want to go back to the question I actually asked, which we haven't really teased out, and I'm just going to share some of my thoughts, and he might share some of his that we spoke about, and maybe this will stimulate others. The question I asked was, I think we can all agree that what's happening in many places in the world right now is unholy. I mean, we might call it barbaric, we might call it horrific, but it is certainly not holiness. It is certainly defiling the planet, ourselves, our community, humanity, and the Parsha talks about the fact that we need to purify the sanctuary. And now I'm imagining sanctuaries is not a tent, not a temple, but an actual planet, an actual universe in which we all reside. And what do we need to sanctify and purify ourselves? Because we're all dirty, right? Everything I read to you, all of our teachings tell us that we are all complicit in what's unfolding in the world. Are we all equally responsible? Are we all guilty? No. But we all are we all dirty? We're all dirtied from it. We're all, and so we need to purify both the sanctuary, our larger community, and ourselves. And so there were a couple things I thought about, and I think about this in terms of ritual. Right? I think there's rituals that we could engage in. There's grieving rituals we could engage in. Now, I want to share that in the work that I've been doing in interfaith and solidarity work, that Palestinians feel very uncomfortable being asked to participate in grieving because they're living in a war zone right now, and they have other things that they're dealing with. So that's not where I'm asking them to join, but I think the rest of us could certainly take time to grieve. I believe, and I've taught this a lot and spoken about this a lot, that grieving really is the foundation upon which healing, repair, and transformation is birthed. It's like the compost in which we can spring forth and flower into a brighter future. I also think that there are other rituals we could engage in. I think naming the horror of what's happening in all the different ways is really important, in the hopes that if we name it and we can take it in, that it might instill in us reminders to not recreate that in the future, to not continually perpetuate this harm and trauma and horror that's unfolding. I think that we could set a day where everyone around the world lights a Yitzhar candle. Yitzhar candles, like those long candles that burn for 24 hours, sometimes less, sometimes more, as an acknowledgement of all the loss, all the desecration in the world. We could hold a week long, so that people can participate in various times and various time zones of ritual activities that people co-create together, that helps to cleanse and purify. I could imagine mikvahs happening, or there's that prayer that we read in the morning that I actually use now when I engage in on the Tilat Yadayim, when I engage in washing my hands. And it says, may the divine beauty guide the work of our hands, and may our handiwork reflect our connection with the divine. I mean, what if every time we washed our hands, just try it for, a day, right? If you can, may the so the first line before that is, may the beauty of the divine power be with us now. So like, may I draw down the shefa of divine beauty and power. And then may that divine beauty guide the work of our hands, and may our handiwork reflect our connection with the divine. Now, this requires, so when I pray, I try to pray in a way that makes it real for me, so that my prayers impact the choices I make in my life, and also give me faith and hope and strength and courage. So it's not going to be meaningful if I'm just like, oh, may the divine power guide the work of my hands. If I mumble it and it's not real, right? But if we found prayers, it could be one word, it could be a saying, that we actually took seriously, that we said with thought and intention, so it really impacted our cells, our pores, every ounce of our being. How might that impact how we acted in the world? I mean, Ami, I remember I've led prayers in the morning about our bodies and being aware of all the different ways our bodies worked. And you shared, like, when you were practicing medicine, how you would sometimes say to yourself, like, may my hands and may my work right now really be holy work. May I draw down that energy. And that impacted your practice. I remember you sharing that.
Before every patient I would see, you go in and you wash your hands in front of the patient. And that became a ritual for me, a very holy moment. And then I could turn to the patient with full presence. And I'm thinking also, we were saying that we have the most beautiful, powerful ritual of Yom Kippur, which we read about today, where we do the naming. We name, to an excessive amount, it seems sometimes, repeatedly in the morning, in the afternoon, the evening, all of the transgressions, our communal transgressions, and we do it for a reason. It's a very powerful ritual. Our commitment, which we're challenged by Rabbi Kat and Rabbi Michael, would challenge us at every Yom Kippur, what is going to be your commitment? Take it from this. And for many of us, perhaps it just kind of fizzled, unfortunately. So yes, there is a need for some sort of large ritual, very much in the line of Yom Kippur and the naming and other such things that we might consider on a larger level to accomplish together, and individually, as the washing of the hands or any other.
Yeah. So I'm also wanting to remind us about the Isaiah Haftorah that we read on Yom Kippur, like the stinging Haftorah, where, right, Isaiah says, is this the fast that I desire? And essentially what God is saying there, right, what Isaiah, the voice of the divine through Isaiah, is saying there is, what do you think you're doing here? Who do you think you are? You don't get to show up to the divine. There's people starving on the streets. Have you been taking care of them? Have you been waging war? What are you doing showing up at temple and asking for forgiveness? Don't ask for forgiveness from the divine. Go out and repair the world. When you repair my sanctuary, then you're worthy of standing before me, the divine, and asking for my forgiveness, but not until then. And that's what this is teaching us. It's really a really radical teaching, and it's uncomfortable. But that's Isaiah. I mean, picture for a moment walking into Shul on Yom Kippur, and someone standing outside and saying, who do you think you are? Is this the fast I desire? No. Free the enslaved. Feed the hungry. Create a just world. Then come back. That's like, Abraham Joshua Heschel says, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. It's a balance. But that's what our prophets are telling us. And I am a big believer in doing that in a way that is also kind and bold and courageous, right? All of that. And sometimes I was listening to a former president of Brandeis University speaking on democracy now. So Brandeis University is a largely Jewish university, and it was founded for Chief Justice Brandeis. And he was speaking about the movements on campus and the issue of free speech. And he said he was very much an advocate for the movements to have free speech. It was actually quite powerful. Now, he was distinguishing between free speech and threats of actual violence. But he was very clear and said, if people feel uncomfortable walking past the encampments, but they're not actually experiencing any actual threats or harms, too bad. They have to walk past the encampments that make them uncomfortable, because you don't have a right to intellectual comfort. On a campus, you don't have that luxury. You're there to be uncomfortable. You're there to learn and to be challenged. And I want to say that is part of our Jewish tradition. Part of our Jewish tradition is to be in communities and talk about things that make us uncomfortable. I mean, the Talmud is full of it. It's full of debates and questions and back and forth and so-and-so challenging so-and-so. It's all there. And we keep it all in there because that's our tradition. And that is truly a remarkable, beautiful part of our tradition. Because a lot of traditions don't have that. So as I say this with intensity in my voice, I'm wanting to also land as love. Like this is love. It's love when we speak to each other and say we're missing the mark. And yes, our tradition calls us to look inside at how we individually are missing the mark, and it also calls us to call out our community and to challenge our community to do better, because the community is just made up of a bunch of us. I'm going to invite a collective deep breath for a moment. Just checking the time.
It's 10.
Yeah, I'm just going to say one other thing that seemed really interesting to me in this. Rabbi Hirsch teaches, so if you remember the goat, the scapegoat that was sent away, and there were these two identical goats, right? One was sacrificed and one was scapegoated and sent away. And he teaches that the reason these goats are identical is because it tells us we must choose between good and evil, that there isn't necessarily a neutral place, that if you don't choose to move toward holiness, then inevitably you're pushing yourself toward a wasteland of spiritual destruction. This is our sage's teachings. It's quite astounding, right? So I'm going to invite us all and bless us all to find practices and rituals that we can engage in every day. They can be very small. You've heard me say that they're prayers that pray me into action, but rituals and practices that can pray you into action, that can give you the courage, the strength, the faith, the hope to take the actions that you need to take, that you believe you need to take, to help create the sanctuary in which we all yearn to live, one in which peace and justice, reparations and repair, and holiness and love can thrive.
Amen.
Thank you. So now we'll turn back to the blessing after. Yeah. Go ahead.
Baruch atah ya Eloheinu melech haolam אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה היה נותן את התורה.